I would like to begin this video clip with the universal greetings of peace in our tradition. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and mercy of the Almighty be upon everyone. We are all aware that this famous saying, truth is the first casualty of war. This is a famous statement which characterizes the present situation in Gaza. Obviously, what is happening in Gaza is not a war, for a war is between two opposing armies. In Gaza, we have Israel, a nuclear power backed by a superpower with an air force and one of the largest militaries in the world. On the other hand, you have the people of Gaza, who do not have a standing army, nor do they have any air force or tanks. They rely upon their bravery and courage to provide resistance against the oppression meted out towards them. Despite the sophisticated Israeli propaganda machine, their misinformation is being exposed. Haaretz, an Israeli newspaper, has revealed Israeli helicopter fired at Nova festival goers. The BBC also found no evidence of Hamas headquarters in Shifa hospital in Gaza. Israeli propaganda is now being spread in South Africa by none other than the Chief Rabbi of South Africa, Rabbi Warren Goldstein. I am Moulana Ebrahim Bham, the Secretary General of the Jamiatul Ulama South Africa, the Council of Muslim Theologians. This short clip is to put the record straight and also to correct the erroneous perspectives and the insightful notions of the rabbi in attempting to create disharmony amongst the people of South Africa. One of the selling points of the propaganda is to portray that the Israeli army is acting in self-defense and of its benevolent nature. It is a hard sale for the Israeli propaganda to convince the world of the benevolence of the Israeli military, when in real time, for 24 hours, across all time zones, the world is seeing through the propaganda of Israel acting in quote-unquote self-defense. It metes out collective punishment of a population, has killed 12,000 people, including close to 6,000 children. Let that sink in. Bombs, hospital, residential blocks and public utilities, cut supply of food, water and fuel in a blockade to a concentration camp that is Gaza. Levels 50% of a besieged territory to rubble. Forcibly drives 90% of the population from their homes. Follows up with bombing those who flee in their places of refuge, the supposed safe zones. Has targeted 34 hospitals and 23 ambulances. What the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, Gaza is becoming a graveyard for the children. Further, UN experts are saying time is running out for Palestinians who are at a grave risk of genocide. The propaganda machine says that South Africa is on the wrong side of history. The propaganda machine belittles the South African government and people as idiots and being on the wrong side of history. Let us be reminded that no one is better qualified to understand oppression and apartheid than the South African people. It is the same type of people around the world who helped end apartheid in South Africa who are standing up for Palestinians. From London, over 500,000 people, to Trinidad and Barbados, to New Zealand and the world over, millions have been marching and protesting to help and to protest against Israeli occupation of Palestine. This also includes Jews in New York who had a sit-in at Grand Central Station and London's King Cross Station. The reality is that the tide is turning and people are no longer confused about who the oppressor is. One propaganda runs something like this. It started on the 7th of October, 2023. Sections of the media and the Zionist propaganda machine would want us to believe that this entire episode of dispossession and oppression started off from the 7th of October. In the face of mounting evidence of Zionist war crimes, the United Nations Secretary General dismissed the idea that it all started on 7 October 2023 with a brazen Hamas attack. It did not happen in a vacuum, he said. It started 75 years ago, and perhaps even earlier. Another dimension. It has been said that survivors and freed captives alike now confirm Israeli army killed their own civilians. It is on record that the captives spoke about the humane treatment while in the hands of Hamas. A Haaretz news report confirms. According to a police source, the investigation indicates that an IDF, Israeli Defense Force combat helicopter that arrived to the scene and fired at terrorists there apparently also hit some festival participants. According to police, 364 people were murdered at the festival. Basis of the genocidal massacres Israel is unleashing on Palestinians in Gaza is turning out to be on the basis of half-truths and falsehood about what happened on the 7th of October. Further, it is emerging that Israeli military and not Hamas killed many of the Nova music festival goers. Many times it has also been portrayed that the conflict is not about the Palestinian people and occupation. In a classic case of distraction, the rabbi states that the present conflict has got nothing to do with the Palestinian people or the establishment of a Palestinian state. I beg your pardon. This is a denial of history. It is about the Palestinian people and the occupation. To give an example from Jewish sources, Haganah terror unit veterans lived to tell what happened in Deir Yassin, where the news of the massacre was used to scare Palestinians away from their ancestral homelands. Hava Keller, a Jewish woman, was at Bir Sheba in Akka to witness Palestinian expulsion and forced removal. She lived to a prime age of 90, telling the world about dispossession and occupation. In 1948, she saw the dismantling of the emptied Palestinian village of Al-Sumayriyah, giving away to her kibbutz Sar. That was the day my Zionism died, she said. I understood that Israel had no intention of living in peace with the Palestinians and that they wanted to expel them from the country. Fast forward 75 years later, nothing has changed. The present Israeli minister has said, we are rolling a Naqaba in Gaza. That is a repeat of the 1947-48 Naqaba catastrophe. Israel is now a nuclear power, bolder, and not even trying to cover up the massacre. Another propaganda machine takes umbrage at being called an apartheid state. The citation of Israel as an apartheid state comes from neither Muslims nor global jihadists. It comes from some of the most eminent voices of humanity who genuinely care for humanity, Jews and non-Jews alike. The defense of Israel as an apartheid entity flies in the faces of those who dedicated their lives to fight apartheid, which was a crime against humanity. Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu said, I know firsthand that Israel has created an apartheid reality within its border and through its occupation. Jimmy Carter's Palestine Peace, Not Apartheid in 2006 addressed the same theme with identical conclusion. Tutu told a conference in Boston, I have been deeply distressed in my visit to the Holy Lands. It reminded me so much of what happened to us as black people. This was further corroborated by Amnesty International, which released a 280-page report showing how Israel was imposing an institutionalized regime of oppression against the Palestinian people. Another propaganda runs like this: Israel unilaterally disengaged from Gaza. This is a propaganda. For firstly, Israel unilaterally disengaging from Gaza and portraying it as an act of benevolence when in reality it is not so. Israel yielded to international pressure and the resistance of the Intifada to give back the territory that did not belong to it in the first place. Since the so-called withdrawal, Israel has for 16 years continuously maintained a blockade of Gaza over land, air and sea. Zionists have waged war on Gaza 5 times, committing war crimes in the name of right to defend itself. Zionists have maintained full control over Gaza, leading to commentators to compare it to a concentration camp, where even the calories of food entering the territory had to be calculated based on bare survival threshold, just to keep besieged Palestinians alive. The collective prison has now turned out to be a graveyard of the martyrs. The collective punishment of Palestinians in Gaza has often been regarded as a crime against humanity at the least. Another contention made by the rabbi is the continuous Jewish presence. The claim of continuous Jewish presence is totally incorrect. First, Jews were expelled from Jerusalem by the tyrant king Nebuchadnezzar. Many centuries they returned and were again banished by the Romans in 70 AD. It was only after the Muslims liberated Jerusalem in 637 that Jews were allowed to come back. If anything, we can say Jews have continuously lived in Jerusalem only under Muslim rule. Because in 1099, when the Crusaders attacked Jerusalem, the Jews were banished. The Jews lived under Muslim rule and side by side with Arabs in the Holy Land. They were all collectively known as Palestinians. One of the most successful periods of Jewish history was under Muslim rule in the Holy Land. The Zionist project changed harmony with the racist claim of Palestine to be exclusively for Jews. History further records that the United Kingdom of Israel lasted for 98 years from 1020 BC to 920 BC. Thereafter, the kingdom was split into Israel, the northern kingdom, which lasted 200 years, 920 BC to 720 BC. Judea, the southern kingdom, lasted for 336 years, 922 BC to 586 BC. This marks the end of Jewish rule in Palestine. On the basis of this, the Muslim rule in Spain was more than the United Jewish rule in Palestine. Will that allow Muslims to claim Spain? The opportunism of Zionist propaganda is evident with the claim by the rabbi that Iran is the threat and using the proxies in a global jihad, even claiming that the present conflict has got nothing to do with the establishment of a Palestinian state or the Palestinian people. This is a freshly concocted lie which is similar to the lie of Hamas is ISIS. This is a classic case of distraction from the oppression and persecution by the Zionist regime against Palestinians. Against reality, the propaganda machine reduces the entire conflict, the entire persecution of the Palestinian people to a global agenda of jihad by Iran. I do not speak on behalf of Iran. However, this is wiping the facts of history and the continued oppression and persecution of the Palestinian people. Israel is no savior of the people of Africa. The attempt to rebel roused by the rabbi is Islamophobic and fails dismally when one considers the well-documented legacy of the Israeli state in dealing with and propping up brutal and corrupt dictators in Africa. The people of the Democratic Republic of Congo are still crying, searching for peace. There is neither Boko Haram nor ISIS in that country. Africa has its own challenges. Characterizing civil discord on the continent as religious is dangerous, deliberate, and irresponsible. Neither have Muslims been the source of conflict on the continent. The largest two crises on the continent, the Rwandan genocide, has nothing to do with Muslims. Neither is the Congo crisis. Even the attempt to bring up ISIS in Mozambique is disingenuous because experts there say that this is a local revolt against exploitation rather than a religious revolt. The rabbi calls upon Christian leaders and citing the Bible to justify his claim and the occupation of the land, as if biblical citations can be a title deed to other people's properties. Palestinians are not Muslim only. Palestinians are not Muslim only. The declining numbers of Palestinian Christians in the Holy Land is testimony to how unbearable Zionists have made their lives to be. Pilgrims to Nazareth and Bethlehem suffer the same humiliation Muslims have to endure in order to worship at the noble sanctuary. The rabbi pretends this does not happen as he deliberately tries to convince Christians on the continent to adopt his Islamophobic attitude, stoking strife amongst Africans. He must remember the Anglican Church declared Israel an apartheid state. The South African Council of Churches and Kairos Africa all have spoken against the oppression of Palestinians in the Holy Land. In trying to cite and to create incitement amongst the African people, maybe it would be good for us to recall the quotes of Madiba, Nelson Mandela, when he quoted, and I quote, "Israeli government is a terrorist state. If one has to refer to any of the parties as a terrorist state, one might refer to the Israeli government because they are the people who are slaughtering defenseless and innocent Arabs in the occupied Palestinian territories. And we don't regard that as acceptable," he said in 1990. And then another of his famous quote, "Freedom is incomplete. Our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians." The histories of our two people, Palestinian and South Africa, correspond in such painful and poignant ways, he said in 1999. For those who are supporting Israel. In conclusion, let me say what is happening in Gaza has nothing to do with the defense of Israel. It is no more than the extermination of an entire ethnic population. The stated goal is about the expansion. Israel wishes to wipe out Palestine from the map and completely erase its existence. It is therefore destroying Gaza and murdering thousands of women and children. Israel has granted absolute immunity to its soldiers, hence giving them carte blanche to murder and slaughter even if they happen to be sick and lying in hospital. We are witnessing the transformation of the largest open-air prison into the largest graveyard of martyrs. I call upon righteous people throughout the world to stand with the Palestinians, for that is the right side of history.